application today, and that is because while there's like many web frameworks in Haskell, which like might sound surprising. Like I feel like a lot of people like might still think of like Haskell as like this like theoretical language, or like that's kind of like how it can be branded at times or whatever. But it's very useful, and I find I'm like 10 times more productive in using Obelisk than I am using like a React or Angular, which is deprecated but still in use for some reason. Um, and one of the reasons for that, and I don't know if we'll necessarily get to that, but like there's like um, it's very easy to like share code between your back end and front end, and there's like even a adaptation of Obelisk we'll get to in the future called Rhyolite, which allows us to basically work off of this like shared type system to build out like a very strong um, WebSocket server from start to finish. But that won't be what we cover today. Today we're just going to be looking at the like how do we make basic HTML, because obviously that's a part of web development. Um, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the debate of whether HTML is a programming language or not, but um, yeah, whether or not you do think so, it's definitely important to know. And then also we'll get into how to do web requests and JavaScript with or JavaScript in Haskell with Obelisk. Yeah.
Cool. Just about ready here. I had to switch over. For some reason, my Emacs extensions weren't loading today, so no idea why.
Demo gods.
Yeah, so I'm just going to use VS Code here because I feel like having syntax highlighting is important.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're just looking at a wall of white text. Okay, let me get this going here.
And so
I'll share my screen so it doesn't. Here we go.
So Kyle, you said we're doing a crypto price feed today, right?
Yes.
Nice.
Just bring over some of the important tabs.
And also
Sorry,
too,
folks.
another thing about Obelisk that's really nice. So like it's a very simple setup. It's literally like 3 steps to set up. And as long as you follow them carefully and do them properly, it should work should work well, assuming you have Nix installed. Nix is definitely a requirement for Obelisk because it uses Nix everywhere. Um,
I'll show at the end of this. I'll show kind of like why that's so awesome. I feel like Nix, like we need to eventually get into teaching Nix a bit more, but it's phenomenal. I would say it's just it's a little tricky to use. Even the community is trying to write a layer on top of Nix to make it a little bit more approachable. But once you understand what it's doing, it's pretty remarkable. So okay, just going to run the application here. So I can get started just going through kind of the like basically to get all of these folders here. I just ran so there all of the sorry Galen, can you mute? I think your cat wants something. um the so yeah, in order to get here, essentially all I did was run ob init. So this ob is like the obelisk package. And I can just show kind of some of the functions. Just take a second here. So, they've got obviously to initialize a new Obelisk project. This might be similar to like npm new or whatever framework you're used to using. They've got deployment, run, REPL. So it's basically they've got all the functions that you need in order to like run a project, deploy a project, This is actually cross-platform too, so you can deploy to both Android and iOS. We'll save that for another time, but it's actually very easy. So yeah, fully cross-platform, and deploys everything to JavaScript. So now that I've got it running, I'll just kind of show you, and ignore these warnings. I was writing this quickly.
Can
But
I
we'll,
add a little little fun context there too? Like, so there's like when we're talking about like Haskell to JavaScript, there's a so we've been using GHC so far. There is a project that was started only I think about 4 years ago, so it's relatively new, called GHCJS. It might even be a bit older than that, but like relatively new, and it's yeah literally compiles Haskell to JavaScript. So this is kind of like what we were talking about with like Haskell, with it being a very strict language that we know is like 100% correct. In terms of the language itself, we can port it to a less friendly, a less safe language, but know that the logic stays safe. So even if like JavaScript has like type errors, what this GHCJS is doing is effectively writing JavaScript that almost like is type safe. Um, and
yeah, I think that's an important thing to note, is that like we're turning, like, basically a lot of people still write in JavaScript or they write in TypeScript. We like to think of JavaScript, HTML, like when we're working with Haskell, these are targets. They're not, like, we're not writing JavaScript. We're essentially compiling down safe code into a language like JavaScript. And so the creators of this library have gone through the effort. You can see all the different libraries they've created to quite literally um, model JavaScript and web development to the extent that if you use this library, things won't break. Like they've figured out all the nitty gritties of JavaScript, and they've put them behind type safe expressions, right? And so we're going to be using those expressions, and because we have, with the benefits of Haskell, we can basically rely on the safety of our Haskell code and then have that convert to JavaScript. We could even probably show some of the JavaScript that gets generated, but for now we'll just kind of move on. Um, so this is basically what we're going to be walking through today. And so if I click refresh prices, basically this is just going through the CoinGecko. So if anyone has played around with crypto at all, you might have heard of CoinGecko. You can use any kind of API. This one I just found they had a decent free tier. So you might notice that I've got a refresh button here. That's mostly just because it's expensive to constantly get crypto prices. So you could turn this into a stream where these are just updating automatically, and that wouldn't be too much effort. But if I did that, I probably would only be able to run this for like a couple minutes. So without paying money for it. So basically all I've done, anyone who's worked with an API before, or if you haven't worked with an API, I'll just give a quick background into like what I actually did here. So I'm gonna got Postman, and I'm realizing I'm gonna refresh my keys after. That's fine. If I go to, where did it go? Developers dashboard. Is it because it's, yeah. Come on. So
sorry. Go ahead.
normally they go to, so I'm just going to type in CoinGecko crypto price API, we'll just say. And I found this yesterday. Now I can't. Okay, API documentation. So most websites will, or most APIs will have a very similar kind of API definition structure here. And they'll walk you through, setting up your API key. This one's actually very clear. You go in, and that's what I was just showing you before is the developer dashboard. You create a new key, and then you basically, it just tells you that, okay, we need to add a header with this query string parameter here, and then throw your API key in there. So I'll show you what that actually translates to. So I typically, like when I'm first testing out APIs, I like to use something called Postman, which is basically just a graphical user interface for creating API requests. And this just helps me test out that the that my API connection actually works. Like sometimes if you're just writing it in Haskell, I mean, if you've done it a million times before, then you can just go ahead and write it in Haskell. But it can get a little confusing of like, is it my Haskell code that's not working, or is it the API that's not working? So we like to isolate issues. Like anytime you have some kind of error, it's nice to isolate it into like where is the error actually occurring. And so I actually did that yesterday when I was setting this up, because I was getting an issue, and I just wanted to know, okay, is it the API that's broken, or is it something I'm doing wrong with my code? Turns out it was just something with the API. So I just came in here and did this myself. So where all this comes from, in CoinGecko, we have this endpoint overview here, and they show you a bunch of different endpoints that you can do. So for me, all I wanted to do was get some simple prices from the API. And so I just went into this simple price here, and it shows me, this one's actually great because it allows you to test it directly in here. But we can, basically, let's say I want the Bitcoin and I want it in USD. Then you can see how that edits the request here to have Bitcoin and USD in the parameters. Click try it, and using a demo, please change your root URL. Okay, well this worked yesterday, but anyways, it works here. And so this gives me the response that I'm looking for. So I'm looking for 3 different coins here, and I want them in the currency USD. And so I'll provide an example of this with the documentation. But basically now all I'm doing is converting this into a backend request. So with web, you can either start from the front end or the back end. I'm typically a back end first developer. I like to just get everything figured out on the back and then display it on the front. You can spend a ton of time making it look really pretty on the front end. I spent a little bit of time doing that, but there are better web designers than myself, I will just say. But the web app works. Like this works in a very robust way. It's only going to refresh once. Anyone who's worked with like a library like React, you might have experience with like the dependency management of React can get pretty tricky. And sometimes you'll have things that update many times or stuff like that.
True story
This
quick.
has none of these issues. Yeah, go ahead.
True story quick. One of the last React projects I worked on a while ago um, was not designed to do this, but ended up doing this because of use effect. Use effect from React made 14,000 web requests.
Yep, I've been
Um,
there.
so
Yeah, so a little bit of history on why this matters. So I've worked at a company, and similar story to Galen. Similar story to Galen, but basically we had a huge product launch coming up, and basically one of the like key stakeholders of the project really wanted to see like how many people are using the application at launch, right? So they wanted to see, okay, how many times are people going to this page? How many times are they clicking on this button, for example, right? This is very important information for a business user, especially when you're launching a new product. Unfortunately, one of our front end developers made a change and it resulted in a feedback loop on the front end. And so the analytics code that I had written previously, which did work, like if you clicked on a button, it would show, okay, send an analytics request to our analytics platform. Okay, this button was clicked. But what ended up happening is that for every click, there were about 5 events that would come through, or maybe sometimes it was 7 events, sometimes it was 12 events. And this all just depended on the amount of times that I forget what it was. It was like the amount of times that they like visited this page, it would like go up exponentially each time because of the re-rendering of the page, and like figuring this out was just a nightmare. And honestly, it ruined our launch, and we ended up not getting the contract. So like this literally destroyed the company. If you want to, like, because the company's no longer around. But and that's why we say, like, these things, they might seem trivial, right? It might be like, oh well, why do you care so much about like doing something right the first time? It's not necessarily about like doing it. I mean, it always is about doing it right the first time, but it's also doing it in a way that like a future change can't break it. And that's very important. You'll kind of understand that more as we go on with Haskell. You'll start to see the light there a bit more, but for now, just kind of like trust us that like a lot of these problems don't happen when writing in Haskell, and we can highlight that. But just a little bit of a history as to like why you would even want to use something like Haskell for a front end, right? It's because we can typify and basically rely on mathematical expressions to avoid these problems. And no one can just come in and change your code without very purposefully doing so.
And also too, just I was like kind of tuning in late here, but like when we say mathematical expressions, like to be clear, we're not talking like 1 plus 1 or whatever. The specific math that we're talking about is like discrete math, category theory math, which just like sounds complicated for sure, but ultimately what it means, like what math is. And Nick's a math teacher, so he probably would have a better definition of what like math is or whatever. But like to my understanding, or how I think of math is just that it's like a set of like rules we've agreed upon, like a set of like reasoning or logic. So when we say like discrete math, like I think the easiest way to think about it is like rules that exist for which for values which are non-continuous. So like a continuous value would be like if we have a graph, um, we want to like graph the slope of a curve, that would be continuous. Whereas like discrete is something like um, crypto here. We have instead of we can't place Bitcoin and Ethereum and WorldCoin and Solana on the same graph. They are just discrete individual values, which we can just say are a group. And so, even like the idea of a group, I'm not using technically correct here, is an idea from like category theory and mathematics, but like more, I think more formally, it would be called a set in this case, and all it's just saying is that these like four things that which are discrete and kind of like in their own existence, we can put them all as one concept of these are all cryptocurrencies. Um, so that's all we're saying when we talk about discrete math, and it gets a lot more um, built up from there. But we'll always make sure to like kind of explain exactly like what that means as we go. So yeah, sorry, I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, no, thank you, Galen. So I'll start because I think the most important thing here is going to be about like asking questions about like specific things in the code that you see. Um, you know, it's very easy for me to kind of just like show you a bunch of code that's written. It's also like I wouldn't want to write this on the fly. Like with Haskell, you kind of want to spend a little bit more time with these kinds of things, and so that's why we prepare these demos. But at the same time, it can look like a lot of code, right? So I think one of the best ways to approach this lesson will be to kind of just give you an overview on what everything's doing here, and then have questions. Like ask, like if you're wondering, like why do we use monad hold? You know, why? What is decode XHR response? You know, why do we use dyn text here? Like these are the questions that I think you should be asking, just to keep in mind. Like try to actually understand what this is doing, and we can walk you through it. And obviously, the code will be on our samples library. So I'll give a quick rundown of how this works. So in Obelisk, we have this folder structure. It comes with the code. Typically, you'll just be using backend, common, and front end. And then there's also some config options, which I haven't used here, but this is great. This is actually a great way of handling different environments. If you have a production environment versus a development environment, you can set up those configs to be aware of that. But what I'll kind of just go through, I'll start with the common. So inside of common, we actually have our routing system. So you can see here, I've defined a backend route for crypto prices. And then inside of the crypto prices, I've created a path segment, crypto prices. And if you notice in here, basically all this is saying is we have a server at localhost 8000, and crypto prices is the path segment for this backend API. Like if I send this, it's going to return this crypto symbol object with the symbol and the price. So that's all this is saying. And then this backend route here will actually, this is defining the route so that both the front end and the back end are aware of the route. And then in the back end, we'll actually implement that route. Here we have just some types that I've created. So I've just created, this goes back to our discussions on domain-driven design. I've modeled, okay, what is a crypto symbol in our system? It has its symbol, it has a name in the CoinGecko, because CoinGecko uses like a different naming scheme than just the symbol, and then a currency that we want to use. And then our crypto data is a crypto symbol with a price.
And sorry, before you move on there, I just have an idea. If it's well, and you can shut it down immediately, Kyle. But like like this was done quickly, so this is not like a by definitely not a shot at Kyle or whatever, because this would actually be kind of like cumbersome to do as well. But like in terms of like what we've learned so far with types, is there like a way we could like I guess in theory improve the
Yes,
crypto
yes. So if you notice here, I'm using string. You can do this, but so I'm not using smart constructors here. Basically, to put it short, like I could, for example, create another data type, or even call it new type symbol, right? Say symbol's a string, right? And then I could create like a make file, or like a smart constructor, but just don't worry about that. Like if I were to do an actual production application, I would be doing that so that we would validate that like all of these types are in fact valid symbols. And I could even connect that to the CoinGecko API. Like they have like an API endpoint for like listing all of the crypto tokens, so you could like validate whether it actually exists in the API before actually creating the types. But we're not going to go there for this example, because yes, it's just more effort, and this is just to highlight something else. This is not the main point of the demo. So
And sorry, last thing I'll say, just as a fun fact, this is not like applicable to the lesson here, but like, um, one thing you could like, I just want to demonstrate a quick thing about Haskell that like definitely no other language can do is, at compile time you could have a like in theory we'll show this way later on, but you could have a system that builds that type for you, based on that API that you're mentioning. So it could literally at compile time ask for the API, get every
yeah,
single option back, and then make that into a type, um, which will be
yeah, that
usable by the rest of your code. So yeah,
would be done at runtime in most languages, and then you would have an error, right? And so
Kyle, just super quick,
yeah,
for a one-liner, Esther just had a quick question of what
yeah.
is Obelisk when you just mentioned it. Do you want to do
So
like a
got it.
one-sentence explanation?
Yeah. So Obelisk is a functional reactive web and mobile web and mobile application framework. So basically, it's if you, I guess if you've worked with frameworks before, this might make sense. If you haven't worked with a framework before, it's basically a collection of libraries and functions that help you build websites, in the simplest way possible. Websites and mobile applications, because everything that we build here, like this could just be an Android app as well. There's nothing saying that this is just a web app. So basically, it gives us all the tools. Like in a very real sense, it's like the folder structure. Honestly, it's like the best way to think about a framework is it's like the folder structure, the function. It's kind of like a grouping of like the folder structure, the functions that you're going to use, um, and then also compile like command line tools. So these different tools like ob init, ob run, these are all command line tools that are built on top of the framework that help us actually, they do a lot of the heavy lifting for us, right? And so if I'm looking at, for example, backend, like backend here comes from the obelisk.backend library. And so backend is a type that expects a backend route and a front end route, and then it's going to run the backend. Basically, it's actually handling. So here, we basically all we have to do is put a function that returns a snap, and then we're good, right? So we've got a backend function here. It's going to handle everything from like putting together the routing, um, you know, uh, encoding and decoding the JSON. All of these things are kind of just built into the way that Obelisk works. And so it's a library. It's a way of running code. Um, and yeah, everything is built off of Obelisk. Like you can see here, obelisk.frontend, obelisk.routes. And again, here we have the front end type, which takes the front end route and then runs the code for that front end route. So it's handling the actual um, code for basically for making your website work. That's like and then Obelisk uses Reflex. So Reflex is really what's doing the heavy lifting here. So if we look at Reflex FRP, you can use Reflex without Obelisk, I think is a good thing to note. Reflex is the actual library that is working with the DOM. So it's actually the document object model, which is what your browser runs off of, right? So if you've used a website, the document object model, DOM, you might have heard of that before. It's basically a model for like what shows up on the screen, right? And so if we want to add a button, we just tell the DOM, okay, put a button here, right? And that's the DOM is basically what your browser is actually running. It's a program that your browser is running in order to show things on the screen, right? A website. And so, yeah, Reflex is what actually handles communication with the DOM using GHCJS, which is what which Galen was talking about before. And then Obelisk is a layer on top of that to put it together into, and they've got a bunch of different, examples. This is more on the Nix side of things. So,
I should also say too, like we will have a session like devoted to like Obelisk,
mhm,
more so like I think the goal for today is just like Reflex specifically. So
yeah,
like kind of only in terms of the Obelisk framework, we're just looking at like front end really. Like so like because there's so much that we can dig into here. I think it's good that we have like a overview of like what the back end is doing,
mhm,
um, so that we understand how we're interacting with it. But we will have like a more in depth explanation of Obelisk, and I think that even honestly, Kyle, like to your point before, it could be a great explanation of like or great introduction to Nix, what Nix is, and why
yeah,
Nix matters. Um, but we have quite a lot of detail to
yeah. Obelisk is
yeah
very complex. They do a lot of things. And I hate using the word complex. Maybe it's very um, feature complete.
yeah
It does a lot of things for us, and it can seem like magic if you don't understand the underlying Nix. So we
and
won't focus on it right now. We have 15 minutes left, so I do want to get into some of the actual Reflex code here.
and I'll say it's easy to use, easy to get started with, like very complex in terms of how it works. I think is a fair point to say, and I find that with a lot of Haskell
Yeah,
libraries is easy to use, very complex to build yourself.
yeah, yeah. The great thing is that people have done that for us, and there's a very good community around Haskell. Anyone who tells you there's no good community for Haskell is lying, just straight up lying. Um, okay, so here we go. Let's get into a little bit of like what we're seeing here. So in so in for front end, so yeah, okay. So these functions all come from Reflex. So I will show you what L is. Basically, these are just functions for creating DOM elements. So we've got L adder, L class, and these are really the ones that you're going to use. L class is just L adder with a class, like a class attribute. So this basically just like this here, L title text, like this literally just converts to this, right? So like in HTML, this would be the same, right? So that's creating us a title block with ATC attribute here. Similarly with here, script, like we're adding in Tailwind, for example, here. So like the styling that you're seeing, this is all coming from Tailwind, which is a very popular CSS framework. The great thing about this is you can actually typify your Tailwind, which I won't let Galen talk about right now because it's going to take us the rest of the lesson. But Galen's
Yeah,
creating
you
a Galen's creating a library that basically makes it so that we don't need to even think about CSS. We just, I want a box here. I want it to go the full width of the screen, and then it'll respond. It'll be responsive from there. So that's kind of the benefit of using Haskell for this kind of stuff is, yeah, you can do this, and it looks pretty much just like HTML, but this is a function that generates HTML, and so that's very useful to us in a lot of ways. But just to kind of dip our toes in here, um, this is, this gives us the ability to basically just write elements. Like again, here, this just gets compiled down to div class equals px6 pt6, and then yeah, just it'll have some content in there, right? And so this is what this is doing. very similar. It uses this DOM builder monad, and so I'll just quickly show that here. Oh no, I deleted my. Oh no, there it is. So DOM builder, we won't go into it, but basically it allows us to sequence all of these different DOM actions together. So we're whenever you see do, we're dealing with a monad. Each line in here must return a DOM builder, and so we can't just do like some random, like can't just like put a string here. We would have to lift that, but we won't get into that. Basically, it makes sure that everything that you're doing in here works with the DOM builder, and so it creates it as one final expression.
And I was thinking about how to explain this in depth beforehand. I think what's important to note with the HTML that we are writing here is that Reflex is designed to be to be easy to do server-sided rendering with. Sorry, server-sided rendering with. So, like for example, like we could do that put string line, and that would run on the server, but not on the client. And so there would be ways in which we handle how to do that if we want to do that. So just
Yep.
that I think that helps explain like some of the things we'll come across.
Yeah, so like you can see how if you look on the left side here, this is just converting to the website that we've built, right? So L class H1, text 2XL font bold, let's trade crypto. Well, you look at here, this is bold, large font, let's trade crypto, right? Just underneath that, we have a paragraph tag, it's italic, we got some padding, right? So we got some padding on the bottom. This example will demonstrate how right? So all of this is just generated from our Haskell code. This here, L class with the little prime after it, basically returns an event, or sorry, no, it returns the actual element itself. So we can use this element in an event. So what we've done here is we've got a button, so a button class with these are just Tailwind classes to make it look pretty. It's blue and it goes darker when I hover over it. With the text refresh prices, this gives me the refresh element, which brings us into one of our first kind of functions that we use with Reflex. So all of this is Reflex, but like L adder, L class, they're very straightforward, I would say, Reflex functions. This here gives us a DOM. So this here basically converts this refresh element, or it gets an event for the click. And this actually, like for example, when this compiles down to JavaScript or to C#, or not Java, sorry, to HTML, this will actually put the on-click, like the on-click attribute into the element, and it'll specify what function that we want to. It'll eventually specify what function we want to run when we click this. But again, this is all abstracted away from us. There's no way that we can mess this up. We're just saying we want refresh element, and we want an event to fire anytime that refresh element is clicked. So here I've just, again, more styling. And then pre-render basically makes sure that this function, correct me if I'm wrong, Galen, makes sure that this function, it only happens on the server side of the rendering as opposed to the client, or is it the opposite?
So pre-render takes two arguments. So the return unit being the two brackets with nothing in it, is what I mean by unit. That happens on the server. So literally nothing happens on the server.
Right.
That really ultimately, by the way, like just you'll see this as a general pattern with like higher order functions or more complicated functions in Haskell, is that sometimes you just have to return nothing of a certain type. And so like return nothing, or sorry, return unit is just like IO. It just fits the IO unit
Do nothing.
type. Or yeah.
Do nothing.
Or M.
That's all this
type.
says.
Yeah.
Right.
And then
So we're saying on the server side, do nothing. and on the client side, run crypto. And this, like, if you don't do this, the type system will fail. It'll just be like, essentially it tells you in the sense of like, I don't understand how to run this event on the server, right? Because we can't. This is a DOM event, right? So the DOM event, it's only able to occur on the front end. And so this is another example of why the type system can be so powerful, is because, like, I don't want to do this right now, but if I were to remove this, it would give us a compile time error saying, you know what, I will. Right? And so, could not deduce monad JSM performable arising from use of fetch crypto prices. So this is, without getting, I'm not going to get too into deep depth with this, because it is a rather confusing, not confusing, it's a kind of a pain if you don't like understand what Obelisk is doing under the hood. But there's documentation that explains this, right? So, and I'm sure Galen could explain it, but just in the matter of time, or in the focus of time, what I want to just highlight here is that this tells us at compile time that something is invalid, which is very important. This isn't just happening when something happens on the back end or when something happens during runtime. This is happening before we even ship the code to the user. That's what I always like to think about, is an error occurring before or after we ship it to a user, right? Once a user's using it, that's when that's when it matters, right? Like, we can have all the errors in the world before the user touches it, and that's actually what we want. But if we get an error when the user is working with it, a lot of things can happen. I mean, you can lose your whole business in certain cases, like we did. Not me personally, but the company that I worked with. So it's like you want these issues to happen before a user sees them, right? And so that's what I kind of wanted to highlight there. But you can see I put it back and everything's running fine. So I've got these two functions here: fetch crypto prices and display crypto table. So I'll just get in quickly into this. Yeah, go ahead.
The last thing I want to add about pre-render, specifically what it's doing, because I think this is important. When I talked earlier about server-side rendering, and you'll find the server-side rendering is very important for like performance in a application. So that's nice that it's built in, and that's why we have pre-render here.
Yeah.
You could, for example, you could build like an element in the server-side things. So that will be the first thing that shows up. You'll see like if you were to run this application with like ldiv, I'm server side, then you'll need the text function too there.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, micromanaging.
No,
But
thank you. It's helpful.
and
It would have told me, and I would have had to figure that out.
yeah, and and then you just want to. Oh,
I've never actually
you don't
done
need
that.
you don't need the return there. That's
Oh,
why.
right.
Because it's already in the monad context.
Yeah, and so you might see, very briefly, you might see the word server. Yeah, there we go. So that's exactly, yeah, thank you, Galen. That was a great real-time example of what pre-render is doing. So if you've heard about what server-sided rendering is, typically you use server-sided rendering for like putting in the shell of your code. And like this might look cumbersome because I'm like putting an element in here, but like I could have a full, this could be pre-render website template shell, which could be a function that returns like the entire shell of the website, right? And so if you've done any server-sided rendering, you might know about like hydration, which is a common theme. Basically what this is doing is it's putting in the shell and then it's hydrating with whatever's here. So yeah, thanks, Gillen. I actually, you actually taught me something today. Like I kind of figured that's how it worked, but I've never actually done it in Haskell. So yeah, like that's what pre-render is it's actually handling server-sided rendering for us. And that's why it fails when you try to use an event, because the server doesn't have a DOM yet, right? Okay, so we'll try to wrap this up quickly so we have time for questions, but I think that was worth it. So basically, I think this is going to be where a lot of our questions are going to come from, and specifically, like that's why I'll leave it at this. Like once I explain this, we'll ask questions. Is how do we actually deal with events, right? And so Reflex has two types. I mean, they have three. So they have dynamics, events, and behaviors. If you master the use of all three of these types, then that's all you need to know. Three types. Really, like the DOM builder, very useful, but like at the end of the day, like you want your application to do something, right? And so three types that you need to memorize or just understand how to use. It's not so scary, right? So really, what we're doing here is this is actually making a request to our URL. I just did this to show that like you can do this as well, but you can actually also get it from the backend route. I said I don't, whatever. So what we're saying here is we want to go to crypto prices. So this is technically not type safe because like I could do like crypto price and then it just like it would fail. But just to sort of showcase that you can also do this.
And we'll get into that with Obelisk.
We'll get into that with Obelisk. So this is really just showing how the events work. So for response event, basically perform request async. I'll just show what that is here. Oh, this is hackage. Go back. Perform request async. Okay, so this comes from Reflex DOM core. You know, it's got a type signature, or it's got type class constraints. What did we say about type class constraints? We're going to kind of ignore them for now. You will understand more about what these do, and ultimately the compiler will tell you. Like all of these constraints, I did not add these. Like I did not just know I needed post build TM. Like at the end of the day, like if you're really good with Haskell, you probably know, oh, I need this. But like at the end of the day, like type class constraints are really just here to help us, and they're here to constrain our values. Unless you're writing your own library, you're really just going to be like, I'll just show you. If I remove this, let me open up here. Did that work? Okay, I guess I didn't need that one. If I
You'll need that one for sure.
no.
I'm even
Oh no, it's because no, I removed it. I removed pre-render from this function actually. So I've got
monad hold is what you would need because of
yeah. Look, I'm cleaning up my code. Here we go. So right here, it's literally just telling me could not deduce monad hold TM arising from use of hold dyn. So right, we talked about polymorphism. Hold dyn is a polymorphic type, right? And so it's saying, okay, that's fine. You can call this function with M, but we need to make sure that whatever is calling this function has an instance of monad hold, right? And so that's all that's telling us is we're going to put that there, and then it's like, okay, good. Now we've constrained our polymorphic function to use monad hold.
And I want to qualify that just a bit more, like because I think this is a good example of like as really as complicated as Haskell gets.
Yeah.
What we're seeing here with monad hold is really as complex as Haskell itself gets. And so, what does monad hold mean? It means that this M value, whatever that type is, has the ability to extract a value on the fly and create it as a dynamic. Or we haven't talked about what a dynamic is yet, but we'll see that in a second. So ultimately, how you can think of it as a context which can extract a value and give it back to you. That's all that monad hold really means here.
Yep.
So
As you can see here,
yeah, and
this
so
is constrained by monad hold.
monad
Go ahead.
sample. Sorry, a monad sample. That's a great prompt for me because like can I actually take a second to explain like the event dynamic?
I think like that's what we should do, and then we should open it up to questions. Yeah.
Okay.
Because, yeah.
So, why we need like FRP or functional reactive programming, which is what Reflex is built on, right? So we have our basic HTML and all that. What we're doing is, yeah. So,
I'm just keep talking. I'm just showing like where you can learn more about this.
fair. So it's just basically like we have two types of values. We have like we can set, like, for example, Kyle has on line 65, let URL equals crypto prices. But let's say like we're gonna get that URL from the user, and like we just have built this this function which can take an arbitrary URL and request data from it. You know, like we're building Postman or something. Um, then that value that we have from the user is very different from what we would just be putting in, right? Those two values are not created equal. One is created like with the script or with the program itself, and one is like at runtime. And so this is basically Haskell saying, how can we make runtime safe, right? Because we know we make compile time safe, but how can we use like build on what we built with compile time to make runtime safe? And so ultimately, so we'll talk about the dynamic event and behavior, but all of it flows from event. So when we click a button, that creates an event, and that's like built into like Reflex. That DOM event is basically saying, like, you know, the on click event, and it's creating like a value of the type event. So like for example, like that event T, that event T is not very interesting because a click has no like information to it. So like we'll see like event T unit, and I'll just type this in the chat. And the unit just did notice that there's no like actual information about this click. We just know that the click happened. Another example to illustrate is, let's say we input or we type text into an input box. Then what we're gonna have, what we're gonna have is an event T car. So we're gonna have one like right each time a user inputs types a key, that's gonna be an event, and what we're gonna do with that event is, you know, put it onto some string. And so if we were to look at that event further and follow that event down the line, that event is going to turn into a dynamic. And like, what do I mean by that is the input. So let's say I typed in something like, I don't know, hockey, because I'm Canadian, and I'm obsessed with hockey, and apparently that's the first thing on my mind. Don't know why, but you know. Anyways, like each of H, O, C, K, E, and Y have all been events. And so I have a system like Holdine. Ultimately, Holdine is being. I'm not like actually doing this. I don't have to think about this when I do inputs. There is pre-built functions here. Yeah. Right. And you'll see input element value. So that dynamic is being created by this like input element for us. But like, let's say we wanted to do that ourselves, we would be using Holdine. Or actually fold dime, which is very similar. It's just a more like it's a more customizable Holdine. And so Holdine just like will replace the element. So like let's say we did use Holdine, the value of our dynamic would go from H to O, right, to only C, to only K, to only E, to only Y. But let's say we want to put them all together, we would ultimately, you know, use full dine or something. That's not the important piece here of how we do it, but we would end up with a dynamic string. Or in this case, a dynamic text, which is the same thing. So yeah.
So the dynamic is really just it's really just it's a container for a value that can change, right? And there's a lot of functions that take you from an event to a dynamic, right? And that's kind of what we're getting at here is like, and we can show different use cases of this if you guys have questions. But like really what we're getting at here is that like we've got a dynamic value and we're updating it with an event, right? And so, for example, where is it? Where do I have? Yeah, so this is the response event. This event is like quite literally holds the information from my web request. So perform XHR or perform request async returns an event that has the information from my request, right? And so what I'm doing here, hold dyn is just like a default. So this first is like a default. Like if I add a crypto data here with a crypto symbol, ASD, ASD, this is just to show the example. And again, this is why it would be good to have smart constructors, but we won't get into that right now. So this is, I'm adding one element to this array, which is a crypto data. And so now you see how this is empty right now? If I refresh, it's going to have that in there as a default, right? So all this is really saying is that hold dyn is saying like, hold this value in place of the dynamic before actually running any events on the dynamic, right? And so decode XHR response event, this is actually giving me that dynamic, and then we're just F mapping maybe over that. So it'll either return nothing or it'll return just the dynamic. And so, yeah, I think it's a good time to probably open up the floor for questions, because really like that's all there really is to this here. And if I look at
sorry, that fmap maybe decode XHR response, I think is a cool example we should like dig into a bit more. And so like what that's saying is, if let's say we get that response event back, we fail to parse it. It's like for some reason something is messed up.
yeah.
We toss that occurrence of the event out, and that event never, according to hold dyn, that event never fired. So that's all.
Yeah, great. And so yeah, then basically we get from fetch crypto responses, we get our crypto data dynamic. So this is a dynamic that holds the current value of our crypto data. So you saw before how it was a default of ASD 100. When this event actually occurs, crypto data dyn will be updated with a new value, right? And then we refresh there, and then it's changing that dynamic value. And then inside of display crypto table here, we use this simple list function, which extracts a dynamic. We give it the dynamic, and then we give it the DOM builder for each dynamic. And here we're just using dyn text. This just extracts the text from a dynamic. And yeah, so we get the crypto symbol, the currency, the price, and we're basically F mapping. We're mapping this. We've gone over map a little bit before, but it'll take some time to get used to. This little symbol here just means map or F map. And so we're just F mapping that over this dynamic to give us the current value. So we're saying we don't care about the dynamic. We want the value that's inside of the dynamic. And so this gives us our table with these values. So I think that's probably where we should end the like formal part of the lesson. But yeah, again, the questions I think are the most important part. So
Awesome. Okay, just a quick thing here before we get into the questions. Actually, I'm just thinking, does it make more sense? Actually, maybe we'll go right into questions and I'll mention what I was going to do in terms of the updates. So if anybody else has questions about what has been shared here, Kyle or Galen, I don't know if you wanted to touch on Monica's question more than what you mentioned, Galen, or like anything that you wanted to say.
Yeah, I can add to that. Yeah, you have a good point there, Monica. So a lot of this, like what we're teaching you is, okay, so let's say let's say you become really good with Reflex, and then you go and work for a company and they don't use Reflex, they use React, right? Which is often a lot of times the case. We are trying to actually place with Haskell jobs, just as like something that might inspire you a bit more. Haskell developers get paid about 3 or 4 times more than other developers. So like we're talking like a senior Haskell developer makes about 400K US. So that might be inspiration for you if you want to get to that level in your career. But it's like we are trying to place you in those kinds of roles. But at the end of the day, what this is going to allow you to do is to better understand why things might happen in React, right? And so a lot of this is to avoid some of the pitfalls in React, like keeping like being aware, like even just having awareness of these things. Like it's like, how do I explain this? Like if you come from a language where bugs are impossible, right? Like you can write Haskell code where like you can't have bugs, and this is why they use it on like spaceships, medical systems, like functional programming. And you can even go like a level up, which is a language called Agda, which puts another layer of abstraction on top of this to the actual values themselves. And you could say, okay, the value can only be 12 or 16. Anything else will fail at compile time, right? And so that's like another level above this. And all of this is like, the purpose behind it is to understand, like the purpose behind us teaching this is to understand that like bugs are not normal. Like they're not supposed to happen. Bugs are really just they're a feature of programming languages not being built from mathematical principles, right? That's why bugs happen. They're not. It's but like the whole like there's in the functional programming space, they almost like they kind of make jokes about debugging, right? And how so many people basically their whole career is just debugging, where it's like these kinds of things just shouldn't really happen. And so learning this way of building web applications will help you. It's helped me even when using like React and stuff like that, because it's like it adds it forces you to challenge your fellow developers, right? So if you've got I was working with someone who I think he was like 60 years old, had been programming for his entire life. But he was very much in this like debugging mindset, right? Of like, I'm just going to write this code and then we'll write a bunch of tests. And like now, like looking back at it, like that's kind of why I don't want to say he's not the sole reason that the company failed. I'm not saying that, but it's just that one bug that was like those bugs that were happening that I explained at the beginning of the call, where events were firing all over the place and we had to basically rewrite our entire front end with like 2 days to go. That kind of happened because of that debugging mindset, right? And so at the time I had been doing Reflex, and so I was kind of like the person in the room being like, hey, like this shouldn't happen. Like, why is this happening? Let's try to figure out why this is happening. Why are there bugs? Is it because of the way that we're writing our code? And so it's gonna make you the voice of reason in the room, I think is the best way to kind of put it, even when if you're not using Haskell itself. It'll also just make the code that you write a lot safer, right? So I think that I just wanted to add that onto to the whole thing about like, does this help React? It'll help you understand web development at its core, like because React is just doing these things in a more I would say not as pretty of a way. Like they try to add a bunch of like language syntax to deal with state, to deal with like passing properties between methods, to deal with like
Use
dependency
effect.
arrays and use effect. Like if you've ever seen use effect, that function gives me nightmares, I will just say. So it's like you'll start to see, basically it's like this. It's like if you've coded for say a year, and the code that you write never fails at runtime, and then you go work somewhere where they're having issues, where things are failing at runtime, which is like most of the companies you'll work for, it's going to cause you to be like it almost hurts you, right? Because you're like, well, why is this happening? Well, this shouldn't happen at runtime. And you'll start to see the you'll start to see how the language itself actually causes that. Yeah.
Whatever happens between us, it happens. But I will share this with her.
Oh, Monica, you came off of mute. Did you want to ask a question or add something? Maybe not.
No, I'm good.
Awesome. No worries.
I see that. I see that you understand. That's awesome. Yeah, it really is awesome. It's about being that next like this is going to set you up to be a lead developer as opposed to, but go ahead, Galen.
You'll remind me to Kyle and Lauren to make that into a YouTube short, because that sums it up in a nutshell.
Yeah, let's do that.
That's like should be Ace's Bible, what you just said there. Literally, that's it in a nutshell. I have nothing to add to that because that was good. So
perfect. All right, cool. Hot takes number 2. I have a lot of hot takes, but I can back them up.
We should change this from Saturday live coding sessions to Kyle's hot takes.
No, but it's true. Like, there's so much. Anyone who's in the if you've been programming and you're a developer, like I'm going on 8 years professionally now, like you see a lot of waste in it. Like if you actually really like programming, it kind of just hurts. Like a lot of people don't, like they just go into their job, they get the work done, and then they go home. Like they're not actually thinking about, and like to them, like a bug just means that they have work tomorrow, right? So it's like they're not necessarily worried about these kinds of things, but if you ask any business person, they're very much worried about these things. And so yeah, it's going to set you up for success in that regard for sure, because the business people love hearing things like no bugs. They love that. And so yeah, Nick, you had a question. Okay, did you figure out everything about dynamics, or Galen, did you want to go into a bit more of an example of this until we get other questions?
Yeah, it brings up a good like lack of my explanation. So we did talk about how like an event becomes a dynamic, and that's like true 100% of the time. I can't think of a case that that's not true. That like wherever some value of some type is coming from, we're turning into a dynamic. The next question was about like what is the behavior, and so let's say so going back to our hockey example, and our stupid hockey example where I'm not like combining into a string. I'm just combining it into I'm replacing the letter that's there, so it goes from H to O to C to K to E to Y. If we were to take a snapshot of that at any time, that would be a behavior. So like let's say at when C is the value of that dynamic, we sample it, then that becomes a behavior. And like when so that would become like a behavior where the value is the letter C. And so even if the dynamic changes and continues to change, that C will never change. We'll always have a behavior of the value C.
Could you give an example of like where this would be useful? I haven't really used behaviors, but it does seem very useful in the sense of like
yes,
you can hold on to certain behaviors that happen. Like say you want maybe this would be an example of like writing a search tool where like you want to have a behavior for H, you want to have a behavior for HO, you want to have a behavior for HOC, you want to have a behavior for HOCK, right? And so you can have different and you can actually like search on each of these independently and maybe do like a lazy search across them.
So that's a great like theoretical example of it, because like that's true. You could do that.
But what would you use a behavior for?
What I'll say to that example is like behavior is just a container, right? And so so is dynamic there. So like your example of like creating a search tool which keeps track of everything. I mean, this might be. I don't think this is laziness on my part. It would just be better to keep like a dynamic list where you continue to add to that list, right? The
Yeah,
only
but maybe you had to do something where, you know, like when we're typing hockey, it's happening quickly, right? Like we're going HOCKEY. So like the dynamic is changing at a high rate, whereas like if you had maybe some asynchronous function that needed to run on each of those states, maybe you would use a behavior.
but you would still have like even then you'd still have a dynamic. You still need a dynamic to model that. So
Yeah.
you'd have a dynamic of a list of behaviors. So it's almost
Right,
like
right,
you know.
right,
So at
right.
that point, you might as well simplify and just have the dynamic list.
Okay.
Um,
I'll let you go into your behavior example.
so the only actual that might have not made any sense. And that's fair. Um, but where you'll actually see behavior is um, in so the perform request async um, is where I find I'm using behavior the most. Like it's funny, like although behavior is a static value, I find that I'm using behaviors most like on the fly sort of thing. Um, so like you would use an event to can you pull up what's it called? Gate. Actually, gate would be a good example. Gate and tag. Let's start with tag. Actually, sorry. So like let's say we have a form and we build up a form. You know, we call it my payment form, and my payment form is a type, just like the first lesson we did. It has like 3 fields in this type, you know, of like credit card number, expiry date, security code. That we could like sample get the current. There's a function called current, which allows us to take the current value or like sample the dynamic, and so turning that dynamic form into one snapshot of the form. Then we can use tag to get that to grab that event. And so what that ensures is that we're only sending that request once effectively, and we're only sending that request once with that snapshot of the form. So even if like let's say, so like the key thing is that it's all flowing from the events on the page, right? And so for a second, could you go back to the demo? The like on the
Sorry,
top,
what demo?
like the
Oh, yeah, yeah.
so like let's say let's say this is built on like um, Kyle has inputted the BTC USD, ETH USD, World USD, Sol USD, and the refresh prices is going to look specifically for those prices. Um, like at the moment, the only thing like we're basically setting up a system that is going to be able to respond to whatever user event happens appropriately. And so like the all the logic really starts from refresh prices. And so we click refresh prices that emits an event, and we have things that are listening for that event, right? That effectively like all Reflex is doing is setting up a event listening system. And so everything is just waiting for an event to happen. Um, that refresh prices happens, and we have a a dynamic value which is going to update as a result of the refresh prices. Or sorry, maybe a dynamic value here in the actual code. We have that we're going to perform a web request whenever someone clicks that button, and in the in order to get that request, we don't want to just like fire off a request with no information. So we have to get that information. And so we're going to sample that information from the page. So in this case, it would be sampling the BTC USD, ETH USD, World USD, Solana USD, and then performing that request. And then the response of the request itself is yet another event. And so we
Yeah,
can
so
do stuff with
Galen,
that event. Yeah.
I'm wondering, because it might be good for learning for us to kind of build on this example. So like what you mentioned is I think a really good, like, what if for next week or next lesson, we were to add an input here. And so that you could, for example, you could add a symbol.
Yeah.
Like, would that highlight some of how behaviors work and this kind of thing? Because I'm wondering if there's a way that we can kind of build on this with, like, as a group, right? Like, I think something that might be beneficial is to, like, build
Yeah,
on, like, take an example and then as a group we kind of build on it,
totally. And
because that'll help you understand, like, how do I actually write code?
right, and you know what, and also too, like I'm imagining that the choices of Bitcoin, ETH, World, and Solana are all like hard coded, right?
Right now,
Yeah.
yes. So we could pull this all in from CoinGecko if we wanted.
Okay. Or well, we could
Or
give
you
the
could
user the input.
we could just, yeah, we could have the user add more symbols. Like
Yeah.
that, we could move this over to the front end and then have this route take, I believe we would do it something like this, like instead of unit, it'd be like crypto symbol, right? Something like
Yeah,
that.
we could do that. Yeah, we'll get into that, but
We'll
yeah,
get into
there's
that.
ways we could do that.
Yeah.
Um, so
So yeah, that would be, I think, a good way to build on this. To sort of show, because like HTML, JavaScript, or HTML, CSS, like that's all you need to know, right? It's very, very easy. Where web development is primarily like where it gets more involved is when you're working with events, right? And so I think it does make sense for us to spend a bit more time explaining how the event, like showing how the event system works. There's also where is it? So this is actually, all of this is a precursor, and I think you've completed the first two Haskell projects. So the actual here, sorry, I don't want to go to that one. Where is it? No, wrong one. Haskell projects. So this is where I'll kind of show what the third and fourth are all about. So 1 and 2, primarily console applications, right? But 3 and 4 are actually doing exactly what we've done here. So I can give this project, I think, will be a good kind of start to basically mix this project with the sample that we did last time on Postgres, like persistent, and you've got everything you need to build a simple Twitter clone. Okay, so this actually shows you how to get started with Obelisk, right? So, like, for those that are looking to complete these 4 in it, like introduction, like basically the way this works, we have 4 introductory projects that will, like, once you get to finishing chat server, you'll be, I think, a bit more familiar with like how to write Haskell, because like a lot of this, it looks fine, like you might really understand it. And I know, like myself, like when I first was reading Haskell code, like when my mentor was showing me it, I was like, oh yeah, that's great, this is awesome. Once you start writing it, you'll start really filling in those gaps of knowledge that or like assumptions that you might have made, and so it'll force you to do that. So I think by the time you finish chat server, you'll have a really good foundation of like you'll probably have used a behavior, you'll probably have used, I mean, you'll have used a lot of dynamics at that point, right? And so setting a target of like, I want to finish all 4 of these, right? And then working your way back, will be like, okay, what don't I understand? How, like, I'm trying to update this value and it's just not updating. What's going on? And so that there, I think, is going to be like where I would urge everyone to kind of try to get to this point. And then we are currently working on various other projects that will kind of like specialize you in certain things. But like realistically, like by the time you finish this chat server, And also, by the way, after each 2 lessons, we're going to do like a one-on-one call with you to kind of go over, or not lessons, every 2 projects, we're going to book a one-on-one call with you to go over like how you found it, to kind of ask you questions about your code as if it were an interview. So like you can treat these as like mock interviews where you're showcasing your work. And we'll kind of go through the code with you. But at that point, like, I would honestly say, like, once you finish chat server, if you can explain everything in chat server, like, we could probably vouch for you to at least get a junior role. Like, we're starting to kind of build up the repository of projects that we need you to complete in order to be able to vouch for you. But like, this is a really good kind of goal to have in mind, is like, I want to finish this chat server. So I want to do to-do manager. Then you get into tic-tac-toe, which is a little bit more on the looping side of things. And then like this really gets into like looping and state management with tic-tac-toe. To do is very much just like, okay, I'm going to use a file, right, or a database, write some information to the database. Tic-tac-toe is very much like managing state, because you want to have a game of tic-tac-toe go on, and then you want to start a new game of tic-tac-toe, right? So you have to really manage the state there. Twitter clone, you're getting into actually working with a website, but it's very simple, just pushing something to a database and then pulling it from the database. So really you're putting posts on a feed is what Twitter clone is all about. And then chat server is that back and forth real time, using a lot of events and streams and stuff like that. So once you get there, that's like a good target for now. We are working on more projects to have up on here, but yeah, just encourage everyone to kind of, once you finish to-do manager, tic-tac-toe, like Twitter clone and chat server are where you actually start building applications using Obelisk. You're going to use a lot of what we've just taught you today, or what we've showcased today. And that's going to prompt you to have questions, right? Like I guarantee, maybe you have no questions, and that's awesome. But yeah, that's where you're going to learn to use a lot of what we've talked about here.
And again, always encouraging of every single possible question. You're never gonna offend us with a question, or we'll never be unhappy about a question for any reason. I think even the idea of being unhappy with a question is silly.
Yeah, it's silly.
Yeah.
I think if anything, the more questions you ask, it might reflect better on your performance. So just keep that in mind. Or maybe you're already overperforming, and that's totally fine.
Are there any other questions where someone wants to come off mute or anything like that? I know that I've been prompting it in the chat, but if you want to come off mute, that's also very welcome. And also, when I sent that GIF, I didn't realize, I always forget it takes over your screen as a whole. I was just trying to send an interview GIF. That's all I was trying to do. So
Yeah,
difficult.
I love that feature.
But yeah, any other questions? Awesome. Yes, Monica. Agreed. Questions are our favorite things here at Ace Talent. We love them. Okay. In the meantime, if nobody has any other questions, or just if you're thinking about it, if you're like, okay, they love questions, I gotta be thinking of a question right now, that's also cool. But just a couple of things that I wanted to cover on my end in terms of an update, and then just 2 quick questions that I had. So when I mentioned that we had that interesting update about our recruitment method and our methodology or whatever, Kyle, Galen, and myself, we were talking about like, what is the best way to present you when we go to companies, and what does that look like? And actually, we came up with this idea that we're really excited about, because it's something that will be very unique to us. And again, it will really showcase how exceptional you really are, and really showcase your true talents and whatnot. So when I mentioned, when I've done these one-on-one calls with actually everyone on this chat or this call today, I would have mentioned that we're building a talent profile about you when we present you to the companies. And the idea is that with the talent profile, it's not just your resume that we're putting forward, because obviously there is so much more to you than just your resume. So we wanted to include a little bit more about what that really means. And so the idea that we've come up with is basically building what we're calling a talent tree. And a talent tree, we'll get into it, like if anyone has questions more about what that means or what it really entails, or curious about like how you can level up and get a really nice tree going. But basically think of it as like different nodes to present what skills you have in a way that it shows when you've done these projects or when you've completed these this upskilling of the functional programming practice, you've built certain skills that allow you to do many different things. So maybe Kyle and Galen can also provide an example of that in just a second. But basically, this talent tree is going to showcase all the different skills you have in break-off nodes, both technical and soft skills, because when you do the mock interviews through our platform, when we work on the resources that we share with you, we'll incorporate all of that into this talent tree of yours. The main goal being that when a company takes a look at your talent tree, they'll be able to say, oh, okay, Monica's got this set of skills on the soft skills side. She's got the sales and marketing experience, whatnot. And on the technical side, she's built up this really strong ability to know how to do X, Y, Z. And it basically branches off. So companies will know exactly what they're looking for and how you're actually a really good fit. So I just wanted to share that because we'll go more into it as we develop what that talent tree looks like, but we'll share it in the community and we'll start to build it for you guys as we see more engagement. I also see Galen chomping at the bit, wanting to add something here. I don't know if you wanted to.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, two things. And so like the core idea with the talent tree, like, is, obviously, like, okay, how's this different from like a resume or whatever? You can list off like 1,300 skills that, like, oh, I know how to use Git, I know how to use React, I know how to use JavaScript in your skills section or whatever. But the key thing we're looking at and where this idea came from is like the interconnections between different skills. So like someone who is very good at C is very likely to be good at Python, for example. It's kind of that's I think where the original inspiration was, and it's kind of developed into what it currently is. And the number one thing with that I want to say about that is, like, please challenge us on, like, when it does come out, please challenge us on saying, I think I'm better at this than
Yeah.
the tree represents because of this. Like, so, and that could be as simple as like we have a React section, and there's many reasons why your React score could be lower than it is in reality. That you're actually better at React than we think. One, you're very familiar with JavaScript, so naturally it'd be easier to learn React. Or B, you've done a lot of React in the past, and we just don't know about it. It's actually like on your GitHub profile, and like we want to be able to showcase that. And so, like, literally just tell us about that. Just send us the link. Like, here's the past React project I've done, and we'll update that. Even like further too, like, Monica, with how you're like your career started in sales, or how you were in sales before. That's even another example of, like, I think my communication should be higher for this reason, and we can like update and reflect that. So really, like, encouraging you guys to kind of like challenge us on that and give us information about why your skill tree should be higher at the current moment. And then and as we go through these projects too, it will be like a more tangible way that we can like kind of update your skill trees, and make it very clear to companies why you guys are definitely the best to hire. And I think there's we could honestly do like a 3-hour session on like why we could prove that you guys go into this program, being successful in it will prove that you guys are the best possible hires. Um, and so that the skill tree will help us um, to elaborate on that further. And yeah, the other
Kyle's pulling
inspiration.
inspiration.
Yes, like video
If anyone's
games.
if anyone's a gamer here, this is kind of where the inspiration came from. Is like
No, Kyle, the inspiration came from us.
no. The
Yeah,
idea
exactly.
came from us, but like this is like a more maybe more complex kind of example. But like imagine each of these
Terrible
nodes.
headshot in the middle of that, but
Yeah, that's me in the middle there. But like each of these nodes would kind of be like more like you could imagine like these bigger circles are like topics, and then it kind of breaks down into like it gets more abstract as you go on, right? So it's like, you know, you're really good at that. You have a 90% in front end development because you use like a bunch of different features that make you a 90 in web development, for example. So we'll show you a lot more about this, but this just wanted to give a shout out for the gamers. If anyone's a gamer, that's kind of what you can visualize this as, and we're going to build this as a web, like as something that you can actually look at on our website platform and stuff like that. So
awesome.
Monica asked a great question. I currently use Windows, but I noticed you recommended using Linux or Ubuntu for Haskell development. Is it essential to switch to Linux? Can I continue still using Windows for now at least?
you can. I believe Obelisk doesn't work well on Windows. Correct me if I'm wrong,
Right.
Galen. And that's because Nix is current. Like, so Nix for Windows is still in development.
It's getting there. It's actually quite close.
It's getting there. It's getting there. But yeah, like for Windows, they're still saying to use Windows subsystem for Linux. I would just as a developer, I would very much recommend starting to use Linux, because most of the like serious programming that you'll end up doing, especially if you want to do anything on the back end, it's going to be Linux like 9 times out of 10, unless you work for like some big corporation that they typically like insurance companies for whatever reason like to use Windows because of the security reviews on them. But like even at like my insurance, the insurance company that I work at, we're starting to move over to Linux servers. So it's yeah, Linux is very much recommended. What I will say is I'm on a Windows right now and I'm using Linux. So we in our getting started, if I go to the tutorial here, we have a getting started with Haskell. And here we kind of give you a couple of options. Number one, which we recommend and a lot of people do, is using the Windows subsystem for Linux. So like this, in this terminal here, this is just Linux, but on my Windows computer. So I don't have to dual boot into a Linux computer. I don't need to do anything like that. I don't have to get Ubuntu installed. I can just use this Windows subsystem for Linux. And then Visual Studio on your actual machine, they have a extension, which I think I'll show because it's good. I would get the Haskell extension so that you get all of this syntax highlighting, and you can even set up the language server. I don't have it set up right now, but and then I would get this WSL. And so what this lets me do is I can connect to WSL here inside of, and that was just Control Shift P to open up if you've never done this before, but Control Shift P opens up all of the extensions on here. You can connect to WSL and you'll see down here that it's running on Ubuntu 22.04. And then I can open up a new window, and when I click new window, when I click new file, it's gonna actually, this here is relative to, so if I it's because I already have a function, but if you don't have a folder open, it'll actually open up, it'll be relative to your Linux location. And yes, what Nick said, you can go full out and use Nix OS. It's probably the best operating system to ever be created. Like Nix OS, if a company were to use Nix OS, let's just say the onboarding time would be literally 0.
Yeah.
because it allows you to have the entire environment, like down to like, we want to have this version of Android Studio installed with these versions of these packages, these dependencies, and we want to have Discord set up, or we want to have Microsoft Teams, or I think they have Teams. Let's just say we want to have Teams installed, and we want to have your SSH. We want to have all your SSH tokens already configured, right? So that like you're working within our environment, or like maybe you want to have like monitoring on the system to make sure that people aren't sending files out of their NixOS environment. Like all of this can just be configured, and then it's literally just a file. Like there's just like I'll just geek out on this for a minute because we have a bit of time. There's nixos.configuration, or configure, it's something like that, I forget. Where like literally, you know what, I'll show mine. I've got my own NixOS configuration just on my GitHub, because once you put it on your GitHub, then you'll never lose it. And like if you get a new computer or something, and just pull it down from GitHub and you're ready to go.
And too, what's nice about NixOS is that it keeps track of every single build you've ever done. So I'm at like build 200 or something like that, like literally just hit 200.
Oh yeah, this is awesome. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I royally messed up, and I like I destroyed my like I destroyed my network setup.
Yeah,
This
dude deleted his network interface.
And
If you were to do that on Linux, like have fun. Basically, your only solution at that point is to like plug a USB key in, like copy all your files onto the USB key, reinstall Linux, and then put all the files back on, get all your configuration back and set up. It would have taken him days.
Yeah, all I had to do, and I tried to like directly, figure out how to set up the network again, but that was impossible. And I don't know, yeah, not impossible, but like definitely way over my
Just
head.
too much work.
Yeah, not worth it. And so all I did was I literally just went back to a previous generation, and it was like, oh, well, this works. So
yeah. So like your entire operating system can be defined by one file. So if that is interesting to you, like that, use NixOS. It's awesome. Like for example, you can see even like I've got where do I have it? Like I've got my Postgres. Like this sets up Postgres with all the permissions that I need. Right? It creates the roles and everything for Nix. Where else is it? I think right here, environment system packages. I've got Android Studio installed. I've got Discord, PostgreSQL, Redis, ZSH is even on here, and like literally anything. Like I'm pretty sure I even installed RuneScape with this. Like it was like, because there was a RuneScape like a game that I play. There was a game. Someone made a Nix derivation for a game, and it's like, so it's like literally anything. I guarantee anything that you could think of would just be on NixOS search. Like guarantee, like I can't think of anything that wouldn't be on here. Like if I wanted Postman, there's Postman. If I want, like I was saying, oh no, it's not there. RuneLite. Yeah, there it is. Right. So it's just like literally anything. Slack, there you go. You got Slack. You already showed Discord, but like, so all of this is just like, they're just derivation scripts that allow you to install them to your computer and reuse them. Very cool stuff. So yeah, you can do that. I personally like just have a laptop that has NixOS installed on it, but then I also have Windows Subsystem for Linux set up with Nix, and you can it'll all work they'll work together. Like you can copy code from there into Nix onto Windows Subsystem for Linux, and it'll also work. So.
And also too, by the way, like the reason we use Nix for Ace Talent is because like the number one thing, like anytime you're using like Nix code that we've made, it should be the case that like if the instructions say, you know, run Nix shell, then that should be it. Like there should be no challenges in getting set up that way.
Yeah.
So even
And I just wanted to go ahead.
To even go back to like Monica's original question, like so in theory you could get set up through like Stack on Windows. Yeah, you wouldn't be able to do that for step 3, or sorry, project 3, but you could like start in theory with Stack on Windows. But you're like, I guarantee that very quickly the work to get set up with Windows is going to like pass the amount of work it would have taken to get to that same point with like Nix. You know, so like it's just better to use WSL. The README, Kyle, that you brought up, that or sorry, now you're on Obsidian, but like the from the ATC Haskell tutorial, how to get set up, like that should also get you directly set up with WSL. And if you have like, especially like on setup of anything, like if you have an issue with that, you know, we haven't taught you anything about Nix yet. That will be so cool when we can do that, because we want to make you masters in that as well. But like everything should be straightforward to set up. So if especially there, like if you have any questions with or any challenges with getting set up, like we are here to help.
Yep. Yeah, and this should pretty much get you started with everything you need to do to write your first Haskell program. So I highly recommend looking at this. And like we said, this will work on everyone's machine because it's using Nix. So like if it doesn't, let us know, but it should. And I just wanted to close it out. While we were talking there, I just built this app as an Android app. So there's our
Kyle's hot take number 3. I just built an app while we were talking, no biggie.
Yeah, so there's an APK. I don't have the emulator set up, but we can show you that maybe next time. That like literally, this is why we use Nix. There were no errors. Like the fact that this it just built an APK with no errors, and like this is signed. Like this is cryptographically signed with like, yeah. So yeah.
Kills me.
And if I was on an iOS, literally all I would have to do is just
iOS front end.
But I'm not on a Mac computer, but I would just do that, and then you could, yeah. It's just telling me that I'm not. Yeah, see, it even tells me iOS builds are not supported on this platform. So, yeah, like that. You wonder why we use Nix. It's for these reasons. Like Obelisk is set up to work with. You can even see here they've just got a couple of steps. This is all you have to do to run it as an Android application, right? So yeah, you would just see this, but on an Android phone, and everything would work the same.
Woohoo.
So we'll maybe show that next time, but just wanted to show you how quickly you can build an APK.
Awesome. I think this also might be the most incredibly on time we've ever been, so I'm proud of us, guys.
There we go. We're getting the hang of it.
Just in the last 2 minutes, I just was hoping if you guys could do a quick poll for me just so I can understand a little bit, because obviously the holiday season is upon us. So we just want to get an understanding of what to expect in terms of turnout for next week and the week after, because we were thinking for the 28th to not have a session since that's between like Christmas and New Year's break. But can you just comment in the chat like a Y or an N for yes or no, if you'd be available or attending next week's session? So Saturday the 21st, yes or no if you'd be attending that session. Just because it's also helpful for us to know, since obviously we take a lot of time to prepare the sessions and just make sure it's really good content for you guys. So it'd be better to know if you were able to attend next week. That way we can just make sure that we are all set up. Oh, Monica is ready to go. Okay, so 3 yeses, 2 nos. Okay, anybody else?
And ultimately, if we do learn a session, then we'll also record it, so.
Oh, yeah. Just, I felt like if we got all nos, I would have just said we can do like, we won't do that day just because like it's the holiday day, but I just wanted to get understanding. Armel, Enoch, Oriolua, if you guys can just answer. Thank you. Okay, so like half yes, half no. And some people, Monica and Nick, are more excited about Haskell than the holidays. I'm kidding. But if you are, that's also cool. Okay.
What do you mean Haskell isn't more important than family time? I'm kidding.
Everyone gets what's that Haskell book that I read, Galen, called?
Haskell for 12 principles.
Yes, everyone's getting that for Christmas.
Oh, if you can find it, I will. Yeah, I would love
have
that.
it.
Wait, you have the book, the physical?
No.
The PDF.
I printed half of
Oh,
it.
we could give the PDF out.
Yeah.
I feel like
Yeah, I
that's
do have the
probably
PDF.
fine.
I might have murdered a couple trees by accident by printing out half so I could write down notes, and then I realized I should not do that.
1,700 pages.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there is, on that note, there is a Haskell, like the Bible of Haskell, I would call it almost. Really good if you want to read it. It's about 1,700 pages, but
Light Christmas read. Haskell holidays. Yes.
Yeah.
Guys, we should get that going. I'm saying that. Haskell holidays. Really well
Trending on
done.
Twitter in 24 hours. Let's go.
Yeah.
I've been trying to
Oh,
find the
man.
physical copy of this book.
Instead of
for
the 12 days of Christmas, the 12 days of Haskell holidays. We love
ages.
it. We love it. Okay, I'll take that as everyone has answered. I think I got most of you guys' responses.
On the
Okay,
fifth day
so
of
yes.
Christmas, my true love gave to me Bible and tutorials.
I mean,
And the next day they got Galen's
tutorials.
incredible singing skills.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, so there is the
That's
Haskell
book
book.
there.
It's a whole lot of fun. There's a lot of puns in there that are hilarious.
Yeah.
It's actually a very good book. Like, this is probably one of the best programming books I've ever written.
I do have the PDF though, so I can send it.
Yeah,
we cut that out of the recording when we put it on YouTube.
Yeah, just cut that out. Yeah, no, we're not gonna send this to anybody.
No, I would never send this to anyone. I don't
You
care
have to
about
pay the
sharing
$50.
resources.
You have to pay the $50.
No, I can't in good conscience send that to you, Lauren. So
Yeah.
we're not going to do that.
Man, those emoji reactions actually kill me. So funny. Oh man. Okay. All right. I think we are good to go. If anybody else, again, just a reminder as always, also very quick shout out that Olajide completed his first project. That is awesome.
Yep.
We have another person who got a project done. We love to see it. I'm hoping that next time we have someone else to shout out. I'm sure we will, based on all the questions and engagement and everything today. That is really awesome to see. So we always want to give those shout outs because we really acknowledge the work that you guys are putting in too. We want to show up. We want you guys to show up. There's a lot that will come of this. And then as always, if you have any questions or anything that you need help with, or like, for example, when even going through this Linux stuff or Ubuntu stuff, you can always message in the ACE community platform. So just as a heads up, if you haven't done it before, when you're in the community chat, in the top left, there's a little search bar and it's cut off a little bit. So you might not be able to see it fully. That you can search for people as well. Like you can search for channels and people. Just type in Galen or Kyle or Lauren, and then you'll be able to see our emails that you can DM us. And the nice thing about the DM is that you also get the email notification. So we'll see it right away and we'll be able to help you.
And there's markdown styling in our chat, so we can actually like give code examples and everything. So
that reminds me, I wanted to say this at the beginning of the lesson, but like we're using Obelisk for ACE.
Yeah.
I should have mentioned that. Obelisk and Rhyolite, which we'll eventually get into for ACE. So yeah.
Yeah, that chat that chat's written with Obelisk. So
that's the great example. You guys, yeah, you definitely should have said that at the beginning.
I was just excited.
Awesome. Yeah, seriously. Okay, with that, my friends, we will end it for today. Thank you guys again for showing up. It's so nice to have you guys here, and we love doing these Saturday sessions. It's really, really awesome to build this kind of community, so we're very